All right, so before we get started, I'm going to hand out your DBQs, and we got to do one very important thing. It's it's ceremonial, but it is important, right? Oh, are we ready, everybody? Are we ready? Here it comes. Flamingo Friday. Yeah, there we go. Like a DBQ. All right, here it is. All right, so this is your DBQ. Even though we're not going to use them all, I made this with 8 documents. Huh? This is I'm just giving you your DBQ to look at. So you're going to look at this, and please, when you read through the documents, underline important parts and jot down not just basically what the document is. We have 4 there. One more. Make sure you think in terms of relating it to what you know, related to outside information, related to facts that you have. It's not enough just simply to summarize it. You all can do that quite well. And don't forget, how many documents can you quote in the DBQ? Quote. None. None. Okay, there is one caveat. If you find one perfect, like little 4 or 5 word little thing, you can use it once, like 4 or 5 words. But that is it. Other than that, do not quote them. Use your words related to what you know. And don't worry about this topic. This I took from a couple years ago, DBQ, and I didn't want to reprint the whole thing again. So it's a little bit different than this now, but you can find the question. See the question, everybody? That'd be a darn good question. Do we have enough?
We need one more.
One more? Please. You have an extra one? Oh, everything comes out equal in the end. Evaluate the following statement. The ultimate cause of the Civil War was conflicting sectional differences over slavery. Evaluate that. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you agree with parts? Disagree with parts? That one actually is a pretty good question. If you have a pretty basic answer. Was anybody gone yesterday? I think everyone was here for that. Okay. So please read through these documents on your own. So when you come back on Monday and Tuesday, if you have any questions, I can answer them. Sound good? You have an extra?
Yeah. Maybe everything.
So I didn't count incorrectly in this room. I know it's your bad. Do you feel shame?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm looking at Wednesday for the DBQ, and so go ahead and put the DBQ away because you're gonna read it on your own. Then come back to it. Make sure you have it on Monday. Also, take out that. Just take out your notes because we got to finish this. We got to this, didn't we?
Yes.
We got house divided. Did we get to the Freeport Doctrine?
No.
I think this is where we end.
Was that right at the end? I was kind of hurrying. I know it's my fault. I was hurrying so much I didn't move the mouse. So we got to this?
Yeah.
And who was happy about this? Yeah, nobody was happy, North and South. But Douglas would win in the Senate. This was a race for the Senate. Douglas would win, but Lincoln's reputation amongst at least a few Republicans went up. He was talented, he was intelligent, very moderate on the issue of slavery, as in free soiler, but not abolitionist. It's kind of one of those things we'll keep in mind down the road, because most leading Republicans have a long record and therefore much more controversial. Oh, what was the court case that said slaves or property can be brought anywhere? Yeah, it was Dred Scott. And who was elected president in 1856? A doughface from Pennsylvania? Yeah, James Buck Buchanan. But the Republican Party was created, and who was their candidate who did really well, even though he wasn't on the ballot in any slave state?
John C.
No. Don C.
Yeah, Fremont. John Charles Fremont. So let's go and get to John Brown. So remember, he's Potawatomi or Osawatomie Brown, depending on what side you're on. The hand shaking just a little bit because of the long exposure times. That's not a bad picture. And that's John Brown in 1859. He had grown the beard to disguise himself. He is wanted for murder because of Potawatomi Creek. And 1859, with help of some abolitionists, he went down to Virginia, John Brown's raid, Harper's Ferry, Virginia, where there was an armory. So they made Harper's Ferry muskets there and had muskets. And he was tired of that bullying. And that's how he sold it. The federal government is worthless. They're never going to do anything about slavery. They're going to defend the slaveholders, even though by then it looked like the Topeka Constitution was going to be ratified by Kansas. It took 4 years. And so he brought down a bunch of pikes, some Sharps carbines, which are shortened muskets. These were actually breech loaders, but that's another story. They're designed, easier to carry, a little bit lighter, like cavalry can carry them. And these pikes to arm slaves. And the plan was to raid this arsenal, then move east to where the plantations are. Because Harper's Ferry, the reason why there's an armory there, fast-moving streams. There are the Shenandoah and the Potomac run together. It's got these 4 valleys coming together, surrounded by mountains. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life. And I've been to North Dakota.
Oh.
But
You've been to Miles City, Montana.
well, I didn't want to bring that up. Because you guys were like, yeah, I know, he's bragging. But I'm going to brag again. I've been to both Dakotas.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which one's better?
And once again, that begs the question, why do we have 2 Dakotas? But moving on. Do we need one?
Fun.
But back to this. So that's my poster at Harper's Ferry. It really is stunning. If you ever get a chance, go there. It's a town. It's another one of those. It's up by the U.S. Park Service. It's a national monument, and it's like you enter 1859. So it's got a bunch of stores and restaurants and things like that. It's really a cool place. But that was his plan. And then he would end slavery once and all by starting a slave rebellion. Go along the Appalachian Mountains, freeing slaves and moving south. Now, it's not clear if he really meant to do this because slave rebellions are horrific, bloody, awful affairs, and enslaved people know what's going to happen. But, I jumped the gun here. So the plan was they attacked, they did take the arsenal. We're not going to go through this very quickly, but then Brown didn't leave Harper's Ferry. That's HF, get it? Get it? I figured the initials out for myself. He stayed in Harper's Ferry. He did not leave to where there were other slaves. Now, Southerners after the fact would say, no slaves joined John Brown, so clearly slaves like slavery. Well, there weren't any plantations there. It's in the mountains. So there are very few enslaved people. But he stayed, probably because he never really wanted to start a slave rebellion. He wanted to go and make a dramatic attack on the South, knowing it would fail, and so he could die for the cause. Meaning, become a martyr. That's almost for certain. He had been hiding out with a price on his head for 3.5 years, and he wanted to go out and that's almost certainly what he wanted to happen. And so they attacked. They isolated themselves in the firehouse. Oh, that one didn't work very well. This is a picture of the firehouse. The firehouse is still there. They moved it once because the course of the river changed, the Potomac. But you can go and look at the firehouse. It's a tiny little place where he and his 20 followers held out. They would be surrounded by the army. Eventually, they would take it by storm. He would be horribly wounded, but then tried and convicted of treason in the state of Virginia, not the United States, in Virginia. Tried for treason and insurrection. Now, today, especially because it's a federal armory, it would be a federal crime. But then it was vague because it was in a state, and so he would be tried. He would turn the trial into an attack on the system of slavery. And when he got up and testified, he made sure that he talked about the evils of slavery, how the US government is doing nothing about it, and what's going to happen to the country if we don't get rid of slavery. And it's reported in the newspapers. And when he was finally led to the gallows, this is his last statement. He didn't say it, he issued it, he gave a letter. He gave a letter to a friend who gave it to newspapers, and this was all over the country. Now, there's two things about this. First off, at the bottom, he says, I now think vaguely flatter myself that without very much bloodshed, it might be done. This is really disingenuous. His stated goal was to start a slave rebellion. It's hard to find anything more bloody. So he's not really telling the truth about himself there, which, okay, we know that, but he's hiding something. But here, it's really important that the crimes of this guilty land, first off, what's the crime? And what's the guilty land? Oh, the United States, the entire country. The US, you ever got that? That's what you have to put down. Brown understood that this is not a problem of the South, this is the problem of the United States. And the US government, the US Constitution, and the people, both North and South, refuse to do anything about it, and they're going to have to come to terms with this. A reckoning is coming. And what's the reckoning? Purged away, but with blood, civil war. Now, no one dreamed how much blood would be purged. No one could imagine what's coming. But that's what he said. And so, in the end, he would be hung. That is his grave. So at Harper's Ferry, they don't. I didn't want to start it right away. This video would be played. I'll skip fast for a little bit. That's the whole thing. At Harper's Ferry. It was a great video. I'm stuck. This actor's Ossie Davis. That's Harper's. Hey, John Brown's body is saw thousands of them. Here's the song. First off, can't you see why this is a good marching song? Step, move, go. Great song. So I'll play that to you. It's John Brown's. Here's the marching song. John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave, and then glory, glory, hallelujah. Okay. So if you heard that song, that's what it is. Moldering, I like that means rotting in the grave. I know. Just go with it. Okay. So the reaction in the South was a combination of freak out and, oh, we're right. To them, it seemed to confirm the positive goods theory of slavery. No slaves. Join them. So Southern ideology seemed to be confirmed to them. By the way, they had to know that that was a fantasy, but it fit what they wanted to believe. Free soilers, therefore, are all now John Browns. I already said this before, but anyone that says a free soiler is really someone wanting to cut their throat. Gee, I wonder what prominent presidential candidate is a free soiler. Next, strengthen slave codes in the militia, just like Nat Turner's rebellion. I almost forgot something. Do you notice what shirt I'm wearing? Yeah, this is Pearl Harbor. These are the ships that were sunk in Pearl Harbor. The Arizona, yeah, it's supposed to memorialize the Utah, the Arizona, the Oklahoma. There were a number of ships that were sunk, but most of them, it's so shallow, Pearl Harbor, they brought them back up. And the battleships would fight again in the war. Most prominently at the Battle of Leyte Gulf. So, back to this. In the North, a similar thing. They were bitterly split, though. There were a lot of Northerners who would make these kind of, equivocating statements like, we agree with his position, but disagree with his task. Why? Because by every definition, John Brown is a terrorist. He believes that government is not listening to him. So the normal route of politics is not working, and so what does he do? A spectacular action, anytime that involves horrific violence, to get people to pay attention. Terrorism is a political act. We'll talk about terrorism more down the road. It's a political act. Now, of course, one person's terrorist could be another person's freedom fighter. Now think about all the Irish terrorists that the British would execute. But to the Irish, they're freedom fighters. Yeah. John Brown, is he a terrorist or a freedom fighter? I'm very sympathetic to ending slavery. I know, I've made this, I've talked about the positive and good theory of slavery, and every once in a while I'm like, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, well, it depends what side you're on, doesn't it? So, and then John Brown's body would be sung as they marched south, when they marched for the Civil War. And this seemed to confirm Southern ideology, that the Northern system or the Southern system is tyranny. Why would we ever want that system in the South? And so both sides would be confirmed by John Brown's body. Anti-slavery meeting, and it says Captain John Brown is to be executed. So to talk about them, Captain in the Jayhawk in the Kansas militia. He was a captain. And there's the song, they will hang Jeff Davis to a tree. I like that verse. Jeff Davis would, of course, basically nothing would happen to him after the war. So the election of 1860 is kind of amazing. So right after John Brown, boom, we go right into the election. And everyone's talking John Brown. That summer, Democrats met in Baltimore. Stephen Douglas is the front runner. But now Southerners don't trust him because of the Freeport Doctrine, and Southerners left the convention. So only Northerners remained, and Northern Democrats nominated Stephen Douglas. Technically, he's the Democratic nominee, but in Northern Democrats, and he's sticking with popular sovereignty, the little giant, even though that has now been totally discredited by most people. He's got no choice. Southern Democrats, 2 weeks later, this just happened just on the fly. They did their own convention in Charleston, South Carolina. Charleston, South Carolina. So only slave states were there. And they nominated the former, in fact, what am I saying? Can't find the mouse. There it is. They nominated the sitting Vice President of the United States. Anyone know who that is? John C. Breckinridge. And Breckinridge, John C. Breckinridge, he's the sitting vice president. And what's pro-slavery that came out of the Fugitive Slave Act? What's the term for pro-slavery? What kind of rights? I heard not civil. Yeah, states' rights. States' rights. States' rights pro-slavery. Now, does anybody recognize or know what uniform that John C. Breckinridge is wearing there? That's a Confederate uniform. Yes, he would betray his country and join the Confederacy. The vice president, he'd be vice president until March of 1861 and then join the Confederacy. I should add also, that is a pretty cool mustache. You got to give him that. Got to give him that. And then, so the Democrats are fatally split, but they're going to be split one more time. Another party jumped into the fray. with the goal of the only way to save the country is the Constitution. Now, clearly the Constitution did not work. It did not deal with slavery and the sectional divide, but Constitution. Sounds good to me, right? That is a former senator and vice president. And I swear to you, I am not making this up. John C. Bell. No. Huh? No. It's John C. Everybody's John C. Or Abraham. I know. Everybody in Australia is named Bruce. Did you know that? So with that. So the Republicans are in good shape, aren't they? They're only in the North. They nominated a dark horse, Abraham Lincoln. Every other prominent Republican had a history. So Lincoln could come in with free speech. We got free homes, free territory, no Fremont. Fremont was still a prominent Republican. But Lincoln didn't have a history. Now, the Lincoln-Douglas debates made him prominent in some circles, but most people had no idea who he was. Remember, that was only in Illinois. So they could come in with him as this moderate. And campaigns back then, the candidates did not run themselves. Others did the campaigning. They might give occasional speeches. So he just stayed in Springfield and let Republicans, they could do marches, etc., and just let the Democrats strangle each other. And so, don't worry about Hannibal Hamlin, he's from Maine, but their platform, free soil. Also, federal money for a transcontinental railroad. Also, a Homestead Act to divvy up land that the United States has taken from the various tribes, take it and give it to citizens of the United States. Now that's going to mean the final conquest of the plains. 160 acres. Next, a protective tariff. And of course, a vague idea of workers' rights. Remember, the Republican Party was an amalgamation of free soil Democrats and basically free soil Whigs. So they have policies of both. And that's Lincoln, that's in 1860, early 1860. I like that picture. I don't know, I just think that's a cool picture of Lincoln. I should add, suits are just coming, male suits that males still wear to this day, and that clothing style is just about ready to be created. As new manufacturing techniques, they can start making collars. You know, the first collars for men would be paper, and they would throw them away. They couldn't get them to stick. Now, I was thinking the paper collars, then toss them. All of these would pass in Lincoln's presidency. All of them. Why? There's no Southern senators or congressmen to oppose him. And so the Republicans got this, and others, like, for example, land-grant colleges, etc. So Lincoln's presidency was successful in his goals, but part of the reason was a horrible civil war. Maybe not the best way to get your laws passed. So anybody know what kind of fence that is? It's a wooden, thank you. We mentioned this once before, that's a split rail fence. And so you cut these long poles, put a little X, make a split rail fence. And the term rail for trains would come from these long poles because they look very similar. And that would become Lincoln's nickname. You would take a log and split those, and he would be called Honest Abe. And they try to put this whole thing about this honest politician, which of course he was like anybody else, and he hated the name Abe, despised it. But they called him the rail splitter. And yes, it was one word, but if you type it into the Google or the Word, it will say it's misspelled. But no, that's one word, the rail splitter. So they can play that free labor image. Here, but by the way, an act like that is incredibly heavy. Lincoln was known for him just being this really powerful man who could hold sledgehammers or axes, and here he is the last rail split by Honest Old Abe, and you know it's the Democratic Party. Very clever cartoon. The other, yeah. Well, first off, that's a dog, and that appears to be a haunted doll that is following him, maybe a ghost or a poltergeist. Yeah, I know, isn't that the creepiest? I don't know what that is, but it's something of a bad movie about a doll coming to life. Some kind of, I think it's supposed to be a child. Things were different back in 1860. Now, the rail splitter. And so the 1860, we already said the 18, but I don't know why I typed it again, but it really was then this 4 candidates, and all of them would attack each other for trying to destroy the country. I like this one. Here's Lincoln, Douglas, and Breckinridge ripping the country apart, and here's Bell trying to put it together, and what's in his hand? Glue. Clever cartoon. Even though, how would he put it together? The Constitution. This is a Republican cartoon, and it's showing the split Democratic Party trying to cross the tracks. Douglas and Breckinridge, but they can't come across. That's Buchanan, and here comes the Republican train that split it apart. So that's a very clever ad. Here's my favorite, though. So it's Lincoln and Douglas racing to the White House, racing to the Capitol. And here's Douglas, and he's holding a jug of whiskey, trying to imply a little bit like, it's a Southern reference. And it says, how can I get over this rail fence? And it's Lincoln saying, it can't stop me, for I built it. Get it? Rail splitter, get it? But then in the horrible way they would draw cartoons, that is a slave. And so the slavery represents the fence. Slavery is what Douglas can't get over. And it says, you'll find me in this here fence, Master Douglas. So, one more thing. What is Lincoln carrying there? Now, it's supposed to be an axe, but doesn't it look like a ham on a stick?
Yeah.
Ham! Okay. A what? It could be a plunger. Oh, that'd even be better. So, we're going to jump right. Ooh, that's a creepy one.
What the? Oh.
Yeah, he's about ready to consume the split Democrats. This wide awakes for supporters of Abraham Lincoln, or of Republican Party, and they marched in military procession through northern towns. And Southerners had these militia in southern towns march for Breckinridge. So it felt like this martial or military fight. And they would dress in things that resembled military uniforms, and they would carry lanterns like this that were designed to look like eyes when you saw the flashing light. And basically, we're wide awake to Southern tyranny. We're not going to back down. And so it had this feeling of militarism in the election in a country that, especially the North, where there wasn't really that attitude at all until this election. When the election finally happened, Lincoln, who was not on the ballot in 11 states, won a huge victory in the Electoral College, yet got less than 40% of the popular vote. But remember, presidential elections in this country are decided by state elections. And with the split Democratic Party, Lincoln swept the North. He swept the North. Also, these states voted for him because of the Democrats were split too. Bell got a few votes here. Breckinridge swept the Deep South. The interesting thing is, look how many votes Douglas got. 1.3 million. So we got the second most votes, but he didn't win any states. He only won Missouri, and the delegates of New Jersey split. And so Lincoln's elected as a minority president. That's the quirk of the United States system. So Lincoln is now president. And then, so that means the clear majority of Americans did not want Abraham Lincoln as president. So Christmas is coming. And we're coming to a very dark time. And the only way we do this, I want to play a little bit of music. You want to hear a little music?
Yeah.
And the thing about it is that, this is like a junior high band, and you're going to be just in awe of how good they are. I mean, it's going to kind of blow you away. You want to see this? All right, here we go.
Oh.
Have you seen this?
Yeah.
We got to watch it again. I thought it was a bunch of guys with blue suits. Okay.
After play bad, you do that.
Only parents could like that one. Moving on. And you know what? What the heck, right? So now Lincoln was elected, but he's not inaugurated until March. And so secession happened incredibly fast. South Carolina, of course, led the way and would secede on December 20th. Actually, the vote in the Charleston State House, and because of this, that's why the capital of South Carolina is now in Columbia. But there probably a majority would have voted against secession. But a group of secessionist lawmakers who wanted to be first, they claimed that Georgia was about ready to secede. And South Carolina is like, we can't let Georgia beat us. So South Carolina seceded rather hastily on December 20th, 1860. Georgia was not even close to seceding. But it didn't matter. Boom. And once South Carolina seceded, and here's the big thing about this. When they seceded, I have to add this right away. What did the President of the United States do? Who's the president? Buck Buchanan. Lincoln's not inaugurated till March. Do you remember that term for our candidate who's in office but is not going to be reelected? Yeah, he's a lame duck. Buchanan did nothing. So what did that do what did that tell other southern states? Remember what Andrew Jackson did when South Carolina threatened secession over the tariff? Jackson reacted fiercely and scared other states. It might not have worked this time, but Buchanan did the exact opposite. I'll tell you Buchanan's role in a second. So what were the reasons why? Well, number one, these couple we've talked about before. Congressional minority and free soilers are all John Brown. Abraham Lincoln's really a John Brown, but also that minority in Congress. They see themselves now, if there's a free soil president, a minority here, and eventually, down the road, Republicans might get rid of slavery, or at least restrict it to the point where the Deep South is in real danger of a slave rebellion. But there's something else. With a Republican president, everything changes. There's no Republican Party in the South. But with a Republican Party, a Republican president, he can create a Republican Party in the South. Enemies within, a Trojan horse. And how? Patronage. You might remember that term from the spoil system. Lincoln can create government jobs in the South and give them to Republicans, or convince Southerners to become Republicans. And now you have an enemy within the South. Republicans in the South. Now I know might be saying Republicans in the South. Those of you who follow politics today should know that the Republican Party is now a Southern party. But whatever. Patronage. So down the road, you have Southerners in a minority and more enemies of their system within the South. And that's what convinced other states to join. So they seceded knowing this would start war. They called it a preventative strike. Someday, they're going to attack us. So we are starting the Civil War as a defensive war a just and defensive war, they said. Why? Because someday Republicans are going to get us. And we'll never, ever have another chance. Ever have another chance. Because if we wait 4 years, South will get weaker, the North will get stronger. Now, did you catch this? This is a preventative strike. Did they know that the Republican Party was going to destroy them? Who can predict the future? They have no idea. They're guessing. Couldn't this be an excuse for anybody to start a war? Couldn't you say anybody's going to attack you? Gee, I wonder what the excuse for virtually every war is going to be. Someday they're going to get us. Russia did that. Ukraine, Germany would start World War I because someday France and Russia are going to crush us. Someday. So they allowed the chain of events to happen that led to World War I. We have no choice. And we'll see this in war after war. The United States would invade Iraq because someday they might have weapons of mass destruction. So the US has done it too. And so they're guessing. But they've said it's a defensive war. And you notice I say war. Secession, I have to keep repeating this. Secession equals war. Everybody knew this. Secession equals war. And so, why? Well, in the Declaration of, this is the secession document. This is the title of it. This was in the secession document of South Carolina. If there's any doubt why they seceded, do you see it? Here's Mississippi. Every state that seceded made it very clear that is the reason. I gave you two. We could go through each one, but what is the reason? To protect slavery. Now, the trigger was slavery in the territories. And that is why when people 20 or 30 years later would say, no, the South seceded because of states' rights and protection, anti-tariff, and things like that. But that would have been a shock to the people who actually seceded. So, it's slavery. By the way, this is actually a kind of a catchy tune. I'm just kidding. The secession is quick step. I've heard a band play it. It's actually kind of a cool little song. So we're jumping right to this. Here's South Carolina's ultimatum about secession. This might be one of my favorite pictures ever. Here's Buchanan going, no! But here's South Carolina firing the cannon, basically threatening the United States installations, and you see where the cannon is pointed. That is kind of clever, isn't it? Why? Buchanan started evacuating federal forts called installations all over the South. But not all of them. A half-finished fort in Charleston Harbor called Fort Sumter. So, we're jumping right to here. Oh, let's go right here. There's the Vice President of the Confederacy. And our government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea of the Republicans. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man. That slavery, subordination to the superior race is natural and normal. The positive good theory. That's the Vice President of the Confederacy. So, President Buchanan was in office. That's Buck Buchanan from Super Bowl I. I don't remember Super Bowl I. I remember Super Bowl IV. I was in my 40s. I was going through a rough time in Super Bowl I. There's Buchanan. And Buchanan announced it's unconstitutional to secede. President. Now, why would he care? And then he responded with, it's unconstitutional to stop them. Do you see the problem here? So what is he saying? Nothing. How can you say it's unconstitutional to secede and then say it's unconstitutional to stop it? Meaning he did nothing. He literally hid under his desk. I'm only slightly exaggerating, fearful of assassination. He didn't leave the White House. He did nothing. And then they abandoned all the federal installations in the South. All of them except 3 forts. Fort Pickens right here. They abandoned all the forts around Charleston except Fort Sumter, unfinished, and a fort here called Fort Monroe. That's it. But Sumter's the biggie because that's in Charleston, South Carolina. There's a couple of attempts at compromise. The Crittenden Compromise said no slavery north of 3630. They thought they could extend the line to the sea, but it's too late for that. It's too late. Failed. That's John J. Crittenden. Crittenden's a good example of the Civil War. He had one son fight for the Confederacy and one son fight for the Union. He's from Kentucky. Really good example of the Civil War was a war between families. There was even a proposed 13th Amendment to protect slavery for all time, which did not pass Congress. Ironically, what is the 13th Amendment? Getting rid of slavery, yes. So 2 attempts, and Lincoln, who is in Springfield, made it very clear he's a free soiler. Neither of these are accepted. And it was too late. You know, Derek said, why should you pay attention to unconstitutional secede? It's too late. They're gone. The Deep South is gone. And as soon as South Carolina went, going into the next year, you can see bang, bang, and they all went to the Deep South. And these states are on the edge, waiting to go. The blue seceded before Lincoln was ever inaugurated. They created the Confederacy. There's Jefferson Davis. He was provisional president, eventually president of the Confederacy. He, only the Deep South. He needed, or his capital was Mobile, Alabama. But here's the biggie. For the Confederacy to survive, they need Virginia. Virginia has to join. It's the richest and most populous state of the Confederacy. And as soon as Virginia joins, the capital will move to Richmond. Now, immediately they made policy. Right when Lincoln was being inaugurated, they initiated King Cotton diplomacy. 1861. They would embargo, meaning they would not trade to Britain and France. So no cotton for Britain and France. Here's John Bull representing Britain. And they assumed that John Bull, Britain, would be so enamored by cotton, here he is genuflecting, bowing to cotton, that Britain and France would have no choice but to enter the war. They didn't care so much about France, but they wanted Britain because of the Royal Navy. They knew the British and French army wouldn't have an impact. Remember the American Revolution. The United States won because of the intervention of France. So that's what they were hoping for. The Royal Navy, they could win. And they knew they could win. Let me rephrase that. They would have won. The Royal Navy was huge. You know, Britain didn't have a big army, but they had a massive navy. It failed so bad that it's hard to even comprehend. For a full year, they wasted a year, they didn't trade. They have no industry in the South. They needed supplies. They didn't get them. A full year they wasted. And in that year, everything changed. The U.S. built a navy and could blockade the South. If they would have traded right away, maybe they could have won. It's going to be that close in 1864. That close to a Confederate victory. And on that happy note, take out that packet with the questions for the movie. We're not going to start the movie. Everything's going on right, I thought. But what you're going to do is turn to the back page. And you might see something that looks familiar. It's called the United States.
I actually like this.
To the back. So it's going to be due on Tuesday. But I'm assigning this map right now. Everybody see the map? Now this is what I want you to do right now in the last 5 minutes. See what you know without looking at a map. The first thing it says was, label the states and show Union and Confederates. So let's see if what states you know right now, without looking at a map. Oh, it's not Oklahoma. You can see Oklahoma on there. Don't peek. I saw that. Just yeah. You can look at this map. You can look at this map. That's World War II Europe.
So this one, right?
Oklahoma's not a state yet. It's, remember they created a territory in 1830. Don't look at the map. Turn around. See what you can do without looking. Last page back. That's not Montana.
Are we like writing?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, you know. Oh, one more hint. I'm showing everybody this. This right here, the dark, that's water.
Whoa.
Yeah. I know you all want to write Wyoming. It's water.
Yeah.
That's water. So the state route GA. Yeah, Florida State. Everything except for Oklahoma is a state on this map. It's not Oklahoma. It's a territory created in 1830. Now,
And then Louisiana.
question.
Mississippi, yeah. Is Louisiana LA?
That's legislation.
Where's Missouri? Is this one Missouri? That one's Missouri. Okay.
Everybody, this is 1861, but the green are just slave states. It doesn't mean not all the slave states joined the Confederacy. I know that's cruel.
Why?
See, if you know where things fit together, it helps all your knowledge. It does. It's a great skill. And also, I like maps, so I know all the states. I know the capital. And then you have to put the shoulder. Any territory join the Confederacy.
Okay, that's what I thought. I didn't think that, but.
I can still remember when they started those abbreviations. It's weird. 1970s.
That's Kentucky's the one that's, it looks like chicken. Yeah, that's the only reason I know it. Oh, wait, Tennessee. I don't know.
Oh, is this Missouri?
For the ones I don't know,
I know that the
the whole thing.
So we have, yeah,
Is it Iowa?
we have Ohio, Tennessee, Cumberland,
Yeah.
Mississippi. Close. Yeah.
Sweet.
Indiana. Illinois.
What are these ones?
Cleveland. They're all the Cleveland. North Cleveland, South Cleveland, East Cleveland.
Arkansas and.
Yep. You got Kansas, good? Oh, one more problem with the map, and you're just gonna have to figure out a way to deal with it. Almost all the battles are fought within walking distance of Washington, D.C. So when you try to label them on the map, you see the problem here. So be creative on that one. I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. You show the whole thing. Yeah, put a dot or a number, yeah, that's fine. And if you do that though, there's a box there for a key. There's a box for a key. So yeah. See that empty box there, that's a key because you have to pack in battles, figure out somewhere. Remember 1830?
There's like a weird story behind it. Wow.
Yeah, the panhandle.
Yeah.
Not quite, but you see how.
Sorry, we're not. Sorry.
And right here.
They're all just jumping together. I know all this, I know.
And so.
Okay, we all make mistakes and we learn from them.
But it was kind of considered like this lawless no man's land, so you are right. But the big reason is like.
Seems to be the reason. I know where it was from. Arkansas?
This is close to Mississippi. Ohio is nowhere near.
Okay, Ohio's a tricky one, okay?
Well, I mean, it's closer to Kansas than, let's say, Germany.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Connor.
Actually, you bring up a great point.
That's a really good.
Now remember, all roads